IRS Form W-9, Request for Taxpayer Identification Number and Certification. So if you're a taxpayer, you may be asked to complete this form if you are working with another taxpayer that might have to use your taxpayer identification number, or TIN, for information return reporting purposes. Specifically forms 1099 or 1098. So if you're thinking 1099 INT, which is the interest income form, you might receive that from your bank or an investment firm. 1099 DIV, 1098 forms like your mortgage statement, so on and so forth. 1098 T, which is tuition payments, so it could be colleges. So anything where the requester has to file information returns to the IRS on your behalf. If you don't complete a Form W-9 and you've received payment from such a firm, so like your bank, if you don't have a completed W-9 on file, then you may be subject to what is known as backup withholding. So if you're subject to backup withholding, then the financial institution or the payer is required to withhold 24% of your gross payments. So if you were otherwise entitled to $1,000 of dividend income, then they would have to withhold $240 and send that to the IRS if they can't ascertain your proper Social Security number, individual taxpayer ID number, or employer ID number. So that's the primary use of a Form 1090 W-9. You'll also see that if you do like 1099 contract work, that's kind of using air quotes, where you might be issued a Form 1099 MISC or 1099 NEC, or in certain instances with credit card or like third-party apps such as Venmo, PayPal, things like that. That would be on a Form 1099-K. So this form is getting a little bit more complicated now that we have 1099-Ks out there. So real quick, you've probably signed a version of this quite a few times, especially if you open different accounts. We're going to go through it so that you can pay attention to what you should know about this form. So at the top of the form is your taxpayer information. In part 1 down here is your taxpayer identification number. And then part 2 is where you certify certain things, and then you'll sign at the bottom. This form does not necessarily go to the IRS. It retains in the file of the institution or the taxpayer that requested it from you. So let's start at the top. So at the top, you'll enter your name, so as it appears on your tax return. The IRS actually says you cannot leave this blank. So even if it's a business name, you still have to put your information on this. If you're an individual, you would enter the name on your tax return. If you're a sole proprietor or a single person LLC, you would enter your individual name on your tax return. You could put like a DBA, doing business as, or the name of your business on line 2, but your name would go up here in line 1. If you're a partnership or an LLC that's not a single member LLC, if you're a C corporation or an S corporation, you would enter the entity's name in line 1 as it appears on the tax return. And then if there's a DBA or a trade or a business name, you would enter that in line 2. You can also enter as a trust or an estate. That name, as it appears on your tax return, would go into line 1. So disregarded entities. So a lot of people may be a single member LLC. Unless you specifically declare this on a different tax form, you're basically known as a disregarded entity. In other words, if I'm a single person and I have an LLC, then for tax purposes, the IRS doesn't care what I call myself. If I called myself Tax Solutions Plus or whatever, uh, if if I'm the only member of my LLC, all of my income comes through me uh, unless I've specifically elected a different tax status on a separate tax form. So we'll put the links to the tax forms in the show notes. They're also contained in our articles. There's a couple of tax forms that people could select in order to be treated as the tax entity that they wish to. But if they don't make that selection, then they're considered a disregarded entity. So in line 2, if you have a separate business name or a disregarded entity name, you would enter that here. And then in line 3, you're going to check one box of the proper federal tax classification. So a single individual sole proprietor or a single member LLC would check that box. If you were a C corporation and that's actually your tax status, you would enter that there. If you are a partnership, you would enter that there. So if you're an LLC that has actually filed IRS Form 8832 or IRS Form 2553, those are different tax forms for different tax treatments. So you would then select the tax entity that you've previously filed for. Trusts and estates, you would enter that there. So, and again, just pay attention to this note here. A single person LLC is disregarded unless they have specifically elected that on a different tax form. In line 4 to the right, there are certain exemptions. So generally, individual taxpayers are not exempt from backup withholding. Again, backup withholding applies even if you've provided a taxpayer ID number and then it happens to be an incorrect one or it doesn't match your tax record, then you're going to be subject to backup withholding unless you are exempt for one of many different reasons. Most of those reasons don't apply to individuals. Things like we're exempt because we're the United States government or a federal entity agency under the U.S. government. We're a financial institution. We're a corporation. We are fill in the blank. Most of the time, this will not apply to an individual. And then exemption from FATCA reporting. So FATCA is the tax law that requires certain reporting for foreign accounts. And if you're not otherwise exempt from that, then if you have dealings with foreign accounts under the FATCA, then you would be subject to those filing requirements. And again, a lot of those exemptions are similar to the exemptions that would apply for the backup withholding exemption. So a requester may indicate that this is not applicable, especially if they know that there are no financial institutions or anything like that that are being accounted for. So if I had this on file with my, I don't know, broker, Charles Schwab, I probably would not have to put in any information there because FATCA would not apply to me as a regular taxpayer. So in this case, we've gotten as far as line 5 and we've entered basically John Doe's name and the fact that he's an individual sole proprietor or a single member LLC. In line 5 and 6, we're going to enter his address, city, state, and zip code. Line 7, account numbers. That's an optional field. You can put it there if they request it, but you don't have to. The requester's name and address. Again, since this is going on their files, it's not really mandatory. It's kind of optional information. So now we're going to go to part one. So part one, you're going to enter your social security number if you have one and you're an individual. If you don't have a social security number, but you have an individual taxpayer ID number or an ITIN, you would enter that in this field. If you don't have either, the form instructions state that if you're eligible for one, you need to apply for it. And then as soon as you've submitted your application, either the form SS5 to the Social Security Administration or to the, um, the IRS by filing IRS form W-7, then you would put applied for. I apologize if I said form SS4, that's the application for an employer ID number. SS5 is the application for a social security number. So either of those you would enter in there as applicable. If you're a single member LLC, you would enter either your social security number, or if you have one, your EIN, your employer ID number, but you would not enter your disregarded entities employer ID number. So if you have more than one number, then you should use either your individual EIN or your individual social security number, but not the one for the disregarded entity. So, and then under part two, simply you're certifying certain things. So you're certifying that this is the correct taxpayer ID number. And again, if you don't give one, then they're required to back up withhold unless you are certifying that you're not subject to backup withholding. And again, you can be subject to backup withholding if you don't provide a correct taxpayer ID number, if you've previously received notification from the IRS that you are subject to backup withholding because you have not previously reported all interest or dividend income. So if you have 5 different accounts and you only report interest or dividends from 4 of them, and the IRS catches that you missed a significant amount of income that you should have reported, they can send you a written notification that you're subject to backup withholding. They can also rescind that. But basically, you're certifying that you're not subject to backup withholding that you know of. You're also certifying that you're a U.S. citizen or a U.S. person, whether that's a resident, whether that's a U.S.-based company, and that the FATCA codes, if you've entered them, indicates that you are exempt from FATCA reporting. So if you are subject to backup withholding, you sign this and then you cross out the line in part 2. That lets the other party know that you're supposed to have backup withholding. And then once you establish that, then you sign and date the form. You don't file it with the IRS. You simply give it back to the representative that's asking you to complete this form. So you are giving another entity your tax information, and they are held responsible in the case that your information is leaked. So the IRS does hold them accountable for safeguarding your personally identifiable information because of identity theft issues. So that's all that we really have going over this form. It's a straightforward form, and this is really just to help you understand what happens. A lot of this information is also in the instructions back here. So right here, you talk about what the definition of a U.S. person is. So, a citizen, a resident alien, a foreign or a U.S. created company, an estate or a trust that's in the United States. Discusses more detail about backup withholding, FATCA reporting, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. All this information is also broken down in our article. So if you want to go through a certain part of this, feel free to check out our article, which you can find Simply go to teachmepersonalfinance.com, type in IRS form W-9, and you'll see our tax form. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. And if you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comments section. I read them every day, and I respond to viewers and listeners as soon as I can. Thank you very much, and have a great day.